afternoon presentations? All right, well, I'll just go ahead and get started while you all get seated. I think we have a really interesting afternoon for you. So this first presentation, or first session in the afternoon, is titled GPS-based vehicle trajectories and applications. So we'll explore the uses and benefits of vehicle trajectory data, how these data are obtained, and various issues that arise when working with the data. So our first presenter is Todd Humphreys. He's an assistant professor in aerospace engineering and engineering mechanics here at UT. He specializes in application of optimal estimation techniques to problems in satellite navigation, orbital and attitude dynamics, and signal processing. And Todd is helping me moderate the session.
Okay, thanks, Jen. I'll be trying to talk through this notion of vehicle tracking without the ominous overtones of the word tracking. So if you want to replace in your mind that tracking with something like collecting data on vehicles to improve safety or whatnot, but I really don't want to enter into these questions of privacy and so forth. We've talked ourselves purple doing that in the past. The basic problem I'd like to pose is that there are different levels of information that come depending on how precise your navigation data is in your car or whatever vehicle you're in. If you're at the cell level of granularity, so that you only know where you are with respect to the nearest base station delivering your Verizon data or whatnot, that's one level of granularity. Then you can move down even higher levels where you can aggregate these cells here in B and even further aggregation in C. And it turns out that at the cell level, our movements are 93% predictable. And with just 4 unique locations, we can determine the identity of somebody out of a pool of a bunch of candidates. So it's interesting that we are so predictable, at least at this level. But at the much finer granularity level, we're a lot less predictable. And so it stands to reason that there's more information there to be gained. From these high-level cell sector information, you can pull out what are called eigenbehaviors, or daily routines that people engage in, and you might be composed as a person of only about 4 or 5 eigenbehaviors. Either it's a work day, or it's a weekend, or you're on travel, and all of these fit together to predict your behavior for a given uncertain day. But you might ask, how does the information content scale with the precision of the navigation tool that you're using? If you're using Google Now, which is this personal forecasting engine that Google has adopted, it uses a blend of GPS and Wi-Fi access points. It tries to shut off the GPS at some times to save on battery, but this is increasingly less the case as chipsets inside your phone are more power efficient. But anyway, if you take a look at a Google Now trace, it might look like this. It's sampled your location in several places around the city. This is a picture of Austin. And if it's more relying on GPS, it might be even more accurate. And I asked here at the bottom, kind of in a conjecture, what's the street value of this trace? How much could you sell this trace for? What is the economic value of this? There's value not only in being able to forecast your context for, say, serving up ads or whatnot, but also in safety and in efficiency, so that you could negotiate traffic at better and better levels of accuracy. Of course, we can move from this GPS type of accuracy, 3 to 5 meters, that you see here, down to slightly better than what GPS can currently provide us, lane level accuracy. We can't quite get to lane level accuracy with the standard positioning service. And you can even imagine going down to asking, what's the limit at a couple of centimeters accuracy? And this isn't actually so science fiction-y as it might sound. The surveying world has long been using centimeter accurate GPS to lay down markers. It's just that they take a couple of minutes for this to converge, and they use thousands of dollars to buy the equipment. But that's changing, and it looks like there's going to be a mainstreaming of this kind of carrier phase differential centimeter accurate positioning going forward. And this has a lot of implication for vehicle-to-vehicle communications and for traffic management in general, and for safety. So this is a trace that one of my students, actually Deep, who's sitting in the audience, made using this carrier phase accurate technique. And this trace, different from the Google Now traces that I showed previously, this one's accurate to a couple of centimeters. And it's accurate in an absolute sense. So it's not just relative to the surroundings, but accurate to the center of the Earth to a couple of centimeters. Well, what does that matter? Is there any extra utility to be gained from going from a couple of meters down to a couple of centimeters? I think so. I think the street value of this trace is much higher than the street value of the Google Now trace that I showed you previously. And this follows from basic thinking in information theory. The more distinct locations that you visit, the more I can distinguish between this location, say, and one only 10 centimeters away, the more information content there is in a trace of these locations strung together in time. And it's the uniqueness of locations that drives the information content of each of these traces. So you see here different cumulative density functions for different numbers of locations on the left-hand side. For state level, with just a few locations, of course, I've covered all of your variability. But for sector level, and of course, as we move to the right here with GPS level and centimeter accurate level, it would take me a lot of locations, unique locations, to cover, in a probabilistic sense, your motion and to map that. So what's in a trace? What can you find there? Well, at the city level, you can ask questions like, where do you live? At the cell level, you can ask questions about your daily patterns. Then at the coarse GPS, this is standard positioning service GPS, the vanilla stuff that you get out of your iPhone or whatnot. This is, and the Wi-Fi level, this is a couple of 3 or 5 meters accuracy. You can ask, what is your approximate context? But at the decimeter level, 10 centimeters, you can ask, what is your immediate present reality? And when you're trying to negotiate an intersection, you can ask, what is the immediate present reality of a car that's coming sideways to me? And so this is an exciting new area that I think will be mainstreamed within the next 5 years with implications for TxDOT, for US DOT, and for all the other state dots. So what is decimeter accurate positioning by you? Well, as I say, when you're trying to negotiate one of these intersections, you'll want to know all of your blind spots. You'll want to know who's in those blind spots, what's their velocity, their position, what's their intended trajectory. And you'd like to know this at a level that would prevent any kind of connection between these cars. You don't want to touch these cars, and so you really need to know these things quite precisely if you're trying to push through the efficiencies that would make our intersections very high flow. So I think decimeter accurate is quite possible, and if it's possible, why not go there? Precision, they say, is addictive, and working in location as a researcher in satellite navigation and other types of navigation, I can say that yeah, it's very addictive. Once you get hooked on this centimeter accurate stuff, it's the best pure stuff, and you don't want to give it up. So it can lead to more efficient traffic flow. You can think of it as a way of not just predicting where you'll be in the future, but also using your micro behavior, your small level variations to predict maybe what mood you're in by how you're driving at this low level or high level of accuracy. And then it also can enable you to offer a proof of location to curious cars around you who really want to know if the location you're claiming to be at is the true location where you are. It's very hard to falsify a trace that is accurate at the centimeter level, because maybe then we can tie that to some of your eigenbehaviors, your past behavior. So again, this is that trace that's accurate in an absolute sense to a few centimeters. This is what it looks like going around a curve with that kind of a trace. This is what it looks like coming up to a stop sign. We have 4 different drivers here, 2 of them, well, 4 different runs, 2 of them, one driver, 2 of them the other driver, and you can see that there's a difference in the way that they approach this stop sign. You might want to wonder about this trace here. How did that one get so close? Turns out Google Maps is wrong. I can go out there and survey that with a land survey team, and they will say that we are right and Google Maps is wrong. That's, makes you feel pretty good. But we've proved it over and over again, and it's just hard for them to make all of the things stitched together properly, and maybe they don't care at the decimeter level at this point. But we certainly care. If we're going to have this kind of accuracy, we'll probably need the maps to exploit it. So you can see here velocities for these 4 different traces, and it's kind of fun. Here's a time history of the velocity. There's a way we can time warp these velocities to get them to all line up, one on top of the other, in space, so that now we can compare exactly what Deep was doing on that first run with what he was doing on the other runs. It turns out there's this outlier. His first run, he drove by a policeman, and on the rest of the runs, he was driving more circumspectly. So again, these are the questions that can be asked, but as far as infrastructure is concerned, it turns out that we cannot achieve this kind of centimeter accuracy on vehicles in Texas unless we have a network of reference stations. I should say we can't achieve it with high and fast, ambiguity resolution or initialization time. We want these cars to be able to locate themselves within a few seconds. And there are techniques that don't require a network of reference stations that can locate you within maybe a 10-minute, 20-minute interval down to this decimeter accuracy. We don't think that's good enough for today's customers. So we think that the only way forward is to lay out a network of reference stations across the state of Texas, spaced by about 5 kilometers, and then allow these data real time to get into our smart devices, into our smart cars, so that now we can locate ourselves in a relative sense to this network, and then in an absolute sense, knowing where the network is, to the globe. And so this is a fairly large effort in rolling out new infrastructure, but it's a good example of why I asked John this morning whether the state of Texas or TxDOT wants to be involved in aiding the connected car by rolling out Texas-supported architecture, Texas-supported infrastructure. And this is a good case study of whether this should be done by the private sector or whether the state should be involved. If the state is involved, then the state gets more control over those data and might be able to use it for other purposes other than just providing these corrections to the car so they can look at themselves. And the state maintains its relevance. But, on the other hand, if you want to do upgrades, and he was saying at the very last, we don't want to be in the business of maintaining. If you want to do upgrades, just you want to turn that over to the private sector. So I think it's an interesting question, but this is coming, and your cars are going to know where they are within a couple of centimeters, and it'll be up to us to figure out what to do with that. So I'll turn it over to the next panelist.
Thank you, Todd. Todd knows I find his work exciting. I email him about weekly with a new application that we should work on. So our next speaker will be Yi-Chang Chu. He's associate professor at the Department of Civil Engineering and Engineering Mechanics at the University of Austin. He has his PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. Did I say University of Arizona? No, I'm sorry. He's currently at the University of Arizona, and he's also the founder of Metropia, and that's what he's here to talk about today. His research area is dynamic traffic assignment and simulation, and I'll let him talk to you more about Metropia and how it will help us all make smarter travel choices.
Change the B3.
Go to B3.
And the one on top.
All right.
All right, good morning. I wish there's the University of Austin, then I can come back to apply for faculty position. I'm also a Longhorn, studying my PhD at UT since 95, from 95 to 2002, and then worked 4 years at UT El Paso, and then move on to U of A. What I would like to share with you is some of our kind of like a journey from being a pure theoretical research, working a lot on optimization, statistical analysis, simulation, to all the way to start thinking about behavior. It all comes down to back in 2010, and we developed a so-called large-scale simulation model, being sort of kind of commissioned by Federal Highway Administration, go around the country, just to teach people how to use this tool and also try to be we call firefighter to solve problems. Back in 2010, they have a problem here. I-70 Mountain Corridor is really a statewide treasure. You know, if you've been there, Vail, Copper Mountain, Breckenridge, these are, ever since Thanksgiving to spring break, over a 15 weekend, people love to go up. enjoy their time Friday, Saturday, and then come back Sunday afternoon, and that's really fun. And then, but it all comes down to this: Sunday afternoon, they all have a lot of fun, all exhausted, and they had to sit in traffic for 5 hours just to go through 40 miles of trip back to Denver. We are commissioned to actually use our simulation model to evaluate a number of different scenarios, starting from what we call zipper lane, which they consider possibly the most effective method to hard shoulder running, blow up the mountain to expand the tunnel, all the way to even model a commuter rail. And you can see that all these infrastructure-based solutions are having their limitations. Why? Because even as cheap as $10 million zipper lane projects, you're dealing with only 15 weekend problem. Okay, and so when you just do the benefit cost ratio, it just doesn't work out. Then they say thank you, Chen. We have to go back to the drawing board. Thank you for your services. Nothing worked, and we were kind of frustrated. And then we started to talk to the resort, and they would say, hey, we started thinking about the idea that can you just not kicking out people at noon to extend the checkout time? Could you give them discount if some people willing to leave earlier, leave later, give them a discount on lift ticket, on the hotels, and so we can kind of start to spread out the demand, but in a coordinated fashion. And coordination is actually the key. Congestion occurs when people show up at the same time, clog the freeway. Can we coordinate the departure and then the route choice? And so this is the idea we also started thinking about. Maybe there's something we can do about it. So we developed a back-end technology essentially to predict traffic conditions. But more important is that we use, this is why we gave to users. Essentially, that's the ability to, when you put in the origin destination, actually will predict what time, when you leave it now versus leave it in the next future departure time, how long would that take? And so right now, the user now at a position where they can actually see, should I leave now, or should I maybe, there's a good reason for me to stay behind if my schedule is flexible. Why should I leave now? I ended up spending another 30 more minutes getting stuck in traffic. May just keep back and relax in the coffee shop. Then we use a point associated with this. So the point essentially is just a carrot hook for you to say, okay, information is good. I don't need to get stuck in traffic, enjoy my time in coffee shop. By the way, there's a 70 point for me if I made that choice. So the user make it, and then every departure time we make the route option, the optimal route associated with different departure time. The user make a selection, hit that reserve button, get into the sleeping mode, and 10 minutes before the departure time, it wakes up and reminds you, hey, John, ready to get into a car, push the go button, it turns itself into a 3D navigation app, no different from most of the navigation that you see in the market, but the more importantly, that process is to ensure you leave that time and take the route you committed to in order to reward you with a point that was reserved for you when you successfully arrive at destinations. There's a congratulation page showing that, hey, you earned your 70 point. By the way, you also save 1.3 minutes, and you actually save CO2 compared to leaving a much more congested time period. So there's an instant feedback. If you're good about yourself, you're doing good for yourself and also good for the environment. We also focus a lot on the gamification. We work with a local merchant, national brand, just to, again, you've been asking, what do I do with the point I collect? You can redeem for merchant discount, freebies provided by local communities. Here's an example of working with a Go Local Austin, where they actually offer a $15 fast value count a car. You have to buy it, and actually you can redeem that for free with your points. And if, with that card, go to 500 stores locally, you get between 5 to 15% discount. So that's the way we actually engage local community and help local merchants. Here is the example of how they can feel good about to the environment, where if you earn your CO2 saving and reach 100 pounds, we have actually a relationship with the National Forest Foundation. Actually, we go out and plant a tree for you once your CO2 saving hit 100 pounds. So you are being engaged not only by, I saved 2 minutes for this trip, maybe not a big deal, but after 3 months, you realize, actually I saved 2 hours. That's good time for me to spend with my family, or things that are really good book I want to read. Here is the safety part I want to talk about also in a little bit, is that we're actually doing the navigation piece. The GPS turns on, we start to track. Let me try to avoid using tracking. We are trajectory aware. Trajectory aware, okay. We look at your driving skill, look at your driving performance, looking at GPS as well as the sensor inside the phone, and be able to provide you with assessment on your driving behavior. But not only that, we're not just wanting to make you feel good about or bad about yourself. We're now trying to working with also an insurance company to actually pre-qualify our users, that whoever maintain very high driving score, and maybe they can actually provide a premium discount as a way of incentivizing good driving behavior. But in the context of future multimodal, I want to get into that, is really that once you know a lot about them, you start thinking about, well, is this going to drive along only solution, or you can actually contribute to the multimodal community. We actually have started looking at our user trajectories and be able to say, hey, for some of the users, it's just clock in, clock out every day, but actually there's a bus 2 blocks away from his home, getting to express lane, and dropping off 1 block from his office, but somehow he never tried it. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to work with the transit agencies to actually provide a timely information, detailed instruction, and incentive just to try it. So over time, transit agency wanted to really increase the ridership. This is the opportunity. These are the drive-along drivers. Get to know them, understand them, provide them with relevant opportunities. This is what we've been doing with our back-end analysis. And we did that with example with Portland, and we found out that we can actually help them. They have 10,000 drive-alongs. That's a missing opportunity we can work with. And actually, that's a good amount of potential market for them to look into. So we're really looking at ecosystem in a way that it's not just a technology per se. It's really for agency to jumpstart a project, for the employer, merchant to actually contribute to providing incentive, and also benefit from being part of this ecosystem. And then going to the business model is how can that be financially sustained for a long run, rather than just having a one-time deal and constantly come back to ask for funding. So here is the data part. I want to share with you that we started this project to really change behavior for future mobility management from the behavior side, from thinking about how to motivate people to make a better decision in a coordinated fashion. Data is just a byproduct. But there are a lot of things we actually discovered ever since we launched in kind of soft launch in Austin about 6 months ago. And we have worked with, in about 2-3 weeks, we started out close like 200-300 people, and then we had to stop it because we don't have limited amount of budget for incentive, right? Otherwise, we go broke. And then we want to maintain. It's a private invite only. We maintain our beta user, and in the last 6 months, just with these 300 people, you see a lot of interesting things. We are able to actually successfully reconstruct for every single person. And again, I want to disclaimer, okay, all the data are anonymized. Nobody in my team is able to retrieve identity unless I say so. So later on, you will see my data. So all these data are anonymized, even though you see a trajectory, a prism, we call a prism, that's showing the daily activity pattern for one user, and you observe it over multiple days. That's one thing very interesting to be able to see that. And here is the example of this is in terms of time, and this is space. You can see that they are staying at a certain location, move to another location, stay for some time, and move again. This information is very useful. Again, we see the speed trajectory. When we overlay on top of Google, you can see the hotspot, basically the delay at every intersections. If you overlay multiple trajectory, you can actually have a reasonable assessment of your intersection performance. Just to give you a sense of how quickly, within 16 weeks, I'm showing here about 4 months, we're able to collect data. And here's the evolution. Every blue dots is where we have a point. Every red dot means that we have saturated data points. It means that that location has reasonable amount of data that we can use for analysis. And you can see that it's kind of gradually growing. As it grows, it's within 16 weeks, pretty much we covered the entire Austin area, just with about 300 users. So you can see that this is actually a very low cost way of actually getting to know your system. Just skip that. Intensity is really just another way to visualize your data. you can see that pretty much everywhere you have the blue dot means that somebody had traveled to that point. And you can see it pretty much cover entire metro area. The pink area is actually where you have higher intensity, means that this is the concentration of all the activities of vehicle trajectories passing through. And this is the Tucson data. And this is me. And you can see that I drive around a lot. But you can see that really my area, my activity primarily concentrate around this quadrant because this is my home, this is the university, and this is Metrovia office. Congestion pattern, just using 300 Pro vehicles give you a very good sense about congestion. Here we're seeing the weekend rush hour congestion, not too bad for most of the freeway. Here is a local street. And the next one will show you the major arterials. Again, this is the sort of average processing over 4 months period. And got to give you a sense that over the weekend, the rush hour is not that bad. But the story will be very different during the normal weekday. You can see that the freeway system is much more congested, no surprise, 2 major arteries. And even the downtown area basically is, you have a lot of congestion. Even the local street. What surprised me was the local street was also very congested in certain neighborhood. And that allows you to have a very clear picture of a congestion pattern in your entire region, just with this several hundred users. And all the information is very interesting. We have a way to show by hour of the day, but here it just lumps everything together, so it's kind of like a big blob. But in general, you can see the concentration distribution of your destinations, and by and large, a lot of outskirt area, mostly the residential areas. And again, once you see that this kind of plot by hour of the day, that's very interesting. You can see people are coming in and leaving town by time of the day. And this is Tucson data. You can see a very different pattern. And that's me. Now, as a result of that, we're also able to build a probabilistic prediction model actually can predict for any given person at any given time what is the most likely destination. So if this is me, like 8 in the morning, okay, look at my past history. The most likely destination for me would be go to kids' school. I need to drop off kids, and then go to U of A or go to Metropia office. Or sometimes I travel, go to Tucson Airport. And the data, when we have the data, at that time I have a problem with my car, so actually I have to go to the emission test facility for a few times, and they pick up that as well. And during the weekday in the 6 p.m., I'm able to predict that me is right here in university, and most likely either I go home, or I go to Metropia office, or sometimes I had to pick up to go from one of my favorite restaurants, go home, or pick up kids at Martial Art Place. So this is a destination choice that allows us to actually more proactively predict where they go in the next few hours, because I can actually provide you with warning, alert, knowing that you'll be going to this location in the next few hours. If there's a crash on the way home, I can actually push you an alert to you. Somehow similar to Google Now, but Google Now is predicting only one location. We're predicting at least 5 locations to be relevant. Sensor data is something we look at a lot. We found out that the phone GPS doesn't really have the accuracy we want. It's starting between 10 to 50 feet air, and it fluctuates a lot. And we actually started supplement with sensor data, which is, an iPhone has 6 sensors. And what's most relevant is the aerometer, gyroscope, and proximity. And we use these 3 mostly and use that to correlate their behavior. So distraction is something you cannot really collect from a GPS point. It's only when you start to look at how they actually interact with their phone. They pick out the phone, they tap on the phone, or they talk on the phone. They all actually, when you synthesize all this information, actually you can reconstruct their pattern of interaction with the phone very, very closely. And then you correlate that with their GPS point and realize that as soon as this person starts to tap on the phone, the speed starts to slow down. He's now been distracted. A lot of time, there are a lot of research showing that interaction with in vehicle telematics doesn't necessarily lead to distraction, but you had to supplement that evidence with some actual vehicle dynamics information. So it's important to combine both information to really construct a risk factor associated with distractions. With that, this is my final slides, and I just want to echo back to Professor Wharton's early comment is that we move into autonomous and connected vehicles. In the future, coordination is what we are trying to accomplish for system optimal. In the future, optimal decision made by the system, driver just kick back and let the vehicle automatically receive the best route, best departure time to take in a way to actually spread the load in space and time for the system. With that, I'll finish my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Tom Fowler. He's a vice president at Kimley Horn and Associates here in town. I think pretty recently moved back to Austin. He specializes in transportation planning, design, and operations of ITS, and he works on projects locally and nationally, and he's also a UT grad. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Jen. Well, good afternoon. It's a little sense of deja vu for me being here. About 21 years ago, I was a student here at UT. I'm a student of Dr. Walton's. I had a class with him. Ashby Johnson and Heidi Ross, who are here today, were in my class, so it kind of feels just like old times again. And I would say we haven't changed a bit. You always were. That's what you said.
Like a good consultant.
That's right, that's right. So I wanted to start and just talk about a problem, a very practical problem that we were trying to solve with this project. If you're familiar at all with traffic signal systems, they rely quite a bit, very important to detect vehicles. We need to know who needs to make a left, who's approaching a side street, where are the cars. And when we aren't able to detect vehicles, the system doesn't work as well as we want it to. And those vehicles can include cars, they can include motorcycles, they can include bicycles. And one of the challenges traditionally has been trying to detect bicycles. The most common detection form, and one that we use quite a bit here in the city of Austin, is loop detection. So loop detection, we have a wire in the road. That wire basically has a current going through it, and we're able to detect large metal objects over top that loop. And that works great for cars, and it works pretty well for motorcycles. But when you get a bike, you don't have very much metal, and some of the new bikes don't even use steel anymore. They're using carbon fiber. So, and they're often on the side of the road. They're not in the middle of the lane where the detectors are. So one of the questions is, how do we do a better job detecting bikes? Because if we can't detect bikes, cyclists come up to a signal, they get frustrated, they're not getting the green that they want. They may run through the light, which is a safety issue. We're not promoting cycling the way I think we want to. So we were tasked with looking at some ways to maybe detect bicycles. And that gets into the GPS location, or GPS application that we want to talk about. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of this solution, and it's kind of based on a traffic signal system that we're currently implementing for the city of Austin. A little bit about how the idea was formed, how it works, and what's next. So just for a brief second, Kimley Horn, we're a fairly large multidisciplinary engineering firm with about half of our team focused on transportation and half of our team focused on public sector. Here in Austin, we've got an office of about 25 people, but a lot of this work was actually done out of our Phoenix office, which is where I started with Kimley Horn, by a software group we have out there who's been focused on traffic signal systems around the country. One of the things we always like to promote, we recently made Fortune magazine's 100 best places to work for, and we think that's important because when it comes to software, trying to attract good people that are willing to devote time to new ideas is not easy, and being able to retain those people is very important. And we think we've been successful with some of the applications because we've been able to get good people that seem to enjoy working with us. So I mentioned the basis for this application, this bicycle app, starts with something called KITS, which is the Kimley Horn Integrated Transportation System. It's basically a system that's used to control traffic signals, and it's one that the city of Austin brought us on board in 2001 to help implement for the city. We've been doing this around the country. The black dots are where our offices are. The white dots are where we've implemented KITS. And as we've added a critical mass of clients, we've been able to devote a little more time to research and development and trying to develop some of these new applications that a lot of our clients have said this is something they want to do. what we found is any time we want to develop new technology, it's very important for us to have a fairly large client base that can help support that. And I think this was a case where we were getting that critical mass. We've got kits deployed in a number of places. We have an annual users group where we get all of our clients together. We actually did that in Austin just this past fall, and talk about what are the things that they want, what are the things that they need, what are the things we can add to the signal system that can be implemented today, not just things that are far out that we want to do research on, but what are the things we can actually start to implement. And one of those was this bicycle app, a better way to detect cyclists. And so that leads into what we're doing here. One of the other things I just want to point out, the KITS software, we've got a team of software people, we've got a team of transportation planners and traffic engineers, and I think we're very well integrated into looking at how do we develop systems that do work really well for our clients and solve practical problems. So a little bit about KITS and what's being implemented here in Austin. So generally these signal systems in the lower left, we often have a large number of field devices, including a signal controller, and that's basically the brains of the traffic signal system, or the traffic light. And from that controller, that's where we can determine things like, where do we add green? We also have field detection devices like loop detectors or video detectors out there. We've got cameras, we've got all these things in the field, and we're bringing them all back into a central server. And this is something a lot of systems are starting to go to. We can manage that through a traffic operations center. And very importantly, we're starting to look at ways to bring other types of data, particularly, let's see if I've got that, particularly mobile data. And so that's been an area where traditionally we've just had devices at the intersections. We're starting to look at ways to bring more mobile data back. In particular, realizing that almost all of us have this little GPS device in our pockets, looking at ways we can use that to better operate the traffic signal system. So in about 2010, some of our software engineers that we were bringing on board got very interested in iOS and iPhones, and starting to think about what kind of applications can we develop that will serve our clients better with iPhones. And that eventually got broadened out to Android devices as well, which is where we are now. So mobile technology became a big focus. And we came up with a couple of different areas that I wanted to talk about, specifically the bike app. But some other areas that we looked at were performance metrics. Traditionally when we would do signal timing, we would drive up and down a corridor, and you do that a few times, and you do a before case, you do an after case. And that's not bad, but we don't get real-time feedback. And we wanted to say, could we use a mobile device where if we have multiple users out there that are willing to plug into our system, where we can continuously get feedback on the traffic signal system and how it's working. Do we find out that a particular corridor that normally takes 20 minutes all of a sudden is taking 25 minutes today, and we can investigate that and see what's going on and maybe make some real-time changes. So that was one area we started focusing on, and I want to talk about that for just a second. We started looking at transit vehicles and how can we provide things like preemption for emergency vehicles or priority to extend green times for transit vehicles, and can we use GPS to do that? So rather than having infrastructure at the intersection, which is the traditional way to do, say, emergency vehicle preemption for fire vehicles, traditionally they would send a signal to the traffic signal and say, I'm a fire truck, my lights are on, I'm coming, I need green. We wanted to see it, instead of having to put all that infrastructure out in the field, could we use GPS so we can now track all the fire engines and coordinate directly with the signal controller back in a traffic management center. And so we also wanted to apply that same thing to transit vehicles. And there's a couple other things. I don't want to delve down too deep into some of the performance metrics and get back to the bike app. So one of the ways we were doing this when we talked about performance metrics, as I said, traditionally when we've tried to measure corridor timing, we want to compare a before and after case. And in this case, the before was 40 minutes, the after was 34 minutes. Basically what we are able to do is develop an app on the iPhone or where we can ride along a particular corridor, get video of how we're doing on a before case and after case, get real-time information about how long it's taking us, and be able to demonstrate to clients, particularly to decision makers, whether or not we're seeing actual improvements. So that was something we had in place. When we came to Austin in 2001 and started their traffic signal system upgrade, we knew we had some mobile devices we could bring, but we wanted to see if there were some things that we could do to improve what we are currently providing. And one of the first things that the city asked us to consider was transit signal priority. And I see there's a presentation a little bit later this afternoon, so I won't spend too much time on it, but what we decided is, instead of trying to focus primarily on infrastructure in the field for transit signal priority, instead of putting a lot of new infrastructure out at the cabinet or on a pole to measure where buses are, we said if we can track the buses using GPS, and we could do it with an iPhone, but it turns out the transit system already had GPS devices on there. We said, let's try to get all that information sent directly to our web service. And so rather than a bus approaching a signal saying, I'm a bus and I need additional green, like we want to track all the buses all the time. And when we realize a bus is approaching an intersection and needs green, we'll do that from a central control device. And the big advantage of that is we don't need to put infrastructure out in the field, and so that can be quite a bit of cost savings. It also allows us to make some changes on the fly if we need to reroute a bus. Say if there's some construction and it's going to be happening for a few months, we can change the route. We can put up a virtual detection zone for that bus, and we don't need to put any new infrastructure in the field. And so starting with that, and once that got implemented and was successful, we said, can we use that same technology for bicycles? And so I've got a video I was going to show, and then I'll jump back to the slide, and it kind of explains a little bit about the approach we use for bicycles. And we shot this video, actually myself and Jason Castillo. Jason's our project manager out of Phoenix on our software team. So Jason and I decided, we wanted to go down there and shoot this video, explain a little bit about what we were doing. And we had a good time, but we made a very big mistake, and that was I ran a red light while we were shooting the video. So we made this, we put it out there, we heard some good feedback, but the first thing everybody who saw it said was, I can't believe you actually ran a red light. We can't show that video. So through the magic of editing, we got that out, but I think the video, if it does work, it does show me running the red light. I'm the person in the burnt orange shirt, so I apologize for that. See if anyone catches that in the end. Let's see if we can get that going.
Problems. Transportation agencies are looking towards technology to provide innovative, cost-effective solutions to
Can y'all
existing
hear that?
challenges. Alternative forms of transportation are an important component to reduce individual vehicle travel, and public agencies are seeking incentives to encourage bicycle transportation. Powerful smartphone technology now resides with the majority of our population. Kimley Horn, in partnership with the City of Austin, has developed an exciting new solution that leverages smartphones in conjunction with our existing KITS ATMS functionality to help improve the safety and efficiency of bicycle travel. Here's how it works. Location-based information is provided every second from a registered user's Android or Apple iOS device. The app communicates coordinates and velocity so that the system is aware of an approaching cyclist well in advance of the intersection. As the bicyclist enters a city configurable detection zone, a call is placed at the intersection as the user hears an audio confirmation. Current operation requires the need to stop, dismount bike, press the pedestrian button, then wait for service. Once the light changes, unnecessary time is provided to clear the intersection, creating additional inefficiency. Here's a real example of the solution in action. Simply start the app in advance of beginning the bicycle trip and watch the results. This innovative pilot project demonstrates the value of leveraging current technology to improve the safety and efficiency of bicycle transportation. Efficiency is enhanced by decreasing travel time while collecting valuable performance metrics. This enables the city to further understand demand and refine system performance. We envision applying this cost-effective solution to connect other modes of transportation with existing infrastructure. This includes individual vehicles, pedestrians, and transit. This is just one example of what our firm is able to achieve through collaboration and partnership with our clients. At Kimley Horn, we want you to expect more and experience better.
So I'm not sure if y'all caught that illegal move, but we've since cleaned it up. So when we did this, We're basically, where we are right now with this is we're in the middle of developing a proof of concept. So we have several city employees who are currently testing out the app to see how well it works. There's a couple different solutions for detecting cyclists. You can put specific detectors for the cyclist, and the city recently received a grant to add, I think, about 30 detections systems around the city for bikes. And that's really great because you don't need an app to do that. But the problem is we've got over 950 signals in the city of Austin, so doing that at every signal and maintaining those is quite a bit of challenge. So we're looking for other solutions, and when we implement an app like this, where cyclists could start this on any trip, use this to create their own, basically be detected, we think that's a very cost-effective solution. A couple of things I just wanted to note about that. One is basically all we're doing is providing detection for the bikes. We're not providing any kind of priority for the cyclist. We're not giving them any more advantage than you would if you were just in a vehicle being detected. And that's very important because I think sometimes it's gotten out a little bit of, in fact, there was a recent news article where someone in the news article said, I don't know if we should be giving control of the signals to the cyclists. So we want to be very clear that we're not giving control of the signals. We're basically just making sure they're detected. In our proof of concept, one of our concerns is right now, all the processing for the bikes is being done back at the city's servers. And that's fine when we've got 10 or 20 or even 30 or 40 users. But if we get up to thousands of users, we're a little concerned about that. So we're going to look at some point into trying to move that processing back onto the phone, so your phone will only contact the city server when you're at a detection zone. And I think one of the final things that we're a little bit concerned about is when you're downtown, whether or not you're going to be able to be detected by the GPS. If it loses you for a little bit, we're not going to be able to make that call. But in those cases, we may need to supplement that with some detection at the city. And I think, Jen, are we about wrapped up? Okay. So I'm just going to wrap it up with actually, this was recently we demonstrated this at ITS America, and the gentleman in the dark blue shirt on the right side was the governor of Michigan, so I had a chance to talk a little bit about this app and what's going on in Austin there. And let me just jump right to our last slide. If you have questions, we're happy to answer them. Dave Carey from the city of Austin, who's our ITS engineer, has been involved in this as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you, Tom. The final presenter in our session today is Ken Perrine. Ken is a research associate at CTR. He has degrees in computer science, transportation engineering, and electrical and computer engineering, the latter from UT. He's interested in microscopic traffic modeling, traffic system optimization, ITS, transportation system usability, and he was previously at Siemens before coming with us, so he brings a wealth and diversity of knowledge to CTR. All right, I think that's the right one.
Thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, everybody. So GTFS is Google's specification for how transit agencies can get schedule information to Google so Google can do cool things with Google Maps for the transportation riders. And what we're trying to do is make it so we can use that same information for our own purposes without having to pay for it. So GTFS consists of what's called shapes. Each shape is a series of geolocated points that are ordered that go through every single bus route that's represented within the GTFS set. But one thing to know about GTFS is that all there are ordered points and locations. There's no information about the geometry that's going around the points. There's nothing in there about roads. There may be information about names of roads at bus stops, but for the actual routes with the GTFS that we've been using, there's no additional information about what streets each of the shape points corresponds with. However, for planning purposes, we really need to figure that out. So our planning models have what's used by many different models, which is a node link representation, where nodes are geolocated points that usually reside at intersections or places where there's joints that are together. And then the links are the paths that vehicles can take between each of the intersections. So now, the purpose of map matching is to take these ordered points from the GTFS set and figure out which of the links those correspond with. Why do we care? Well, for one, I already mentioned we're doing transit modeling, but we also want to be able to take any sort of data that happens to correspond with a location in a city and use it with our existing models. GTFS points can be very detailed like this, but usually GTFS points can also include just GPS information that's been ported into a map that has a lot of noise. In this case, these GPS points don't do what Todd Humphreys had talked about in the first talk. Or, in this case we've seen many times, there's missing points. There's large gaps where there's just no points. What do we do with our planning model to apply the GTFS set to our model? Another thing to keep in mind is that the resolution of the underlying model might be very, very different than the resolution of the GTFS points. And we've seen this too. We might have errors within our underlying node link representation. In this case, there's a missing link. And we actually had a number of these within our models that we're using. Here's another area of Austin. This area is a rather busy area where Lamar Boulevard crosses underneath Highway 183, and there's a detailed series of collectors and a park and ride lot. So imagine we had a GTFS set like this. Then the question is, which of the corresponding nodes and links are those that we want to map to? How do we deal with the fact that 183 is elevated over everything else? What happens if we have very few GTFS points and we need to figure out how to navigate through the intersection? Or in the case of most buses that travel through that area, what do we do with the actual transit location where it has to loop through the park and ride facility? This is the methodology we use to do our map matching. We follow a topological approach, which means we combine the geolocations of each of the points and map it on top of the underlying topology. We rely upon our underlying topology for success, and if we don't have that topology, we don't have anything to work with our particular methodology. That's okay insofar as we can only be as good as our underlying topology. We follow a technique that uses multiple hypotheses, which means that if one hypothesis, if we happen to go down a wrong route, we have other hypotheses that have been formulated simultaneously that we can fall back upon if a hypothesis turns out to not be very good after enough points arrive. We follow a global and local mentality. Many other existing algorithms within the literature either are heavily local, meaning that they process point by point. They take upon each point as it arrives, such as a real-time application, and maps out a route then and there. Or a global approach would be to take the entire set of points and find the best route through the underlying topology. We follow either, and we rely upon multiple points to resolve ambiguities that we might have if we have insufficient data when local points arrive, if we're running this within a real-time environment. We also follow a heuristic-free approach. Many algorithms within the literature do special little tricks whenever it comes to bridges or sharp corners. We don't follow any of these heuristics because there are a number of cases where the heuristics break down because of various problems with the data or special cases, special outliers. We merely follow routes through the underlying topology. The workflow we follow in order to use GTFS points within our models includes doing an initial match with our algorithm and then looking at what we call a problem report. because we're still doing an experimental approach with our underlying model, we need to make sure our underlying model is sufficient enough to represent what we need for our further analyses. Using that problem report, we fix the underlying topology, and then we run a refine cycle, which visits the problem areas again and figures out the best matches for going through the underlying topology. When we figure out that we have a good enough match, we then feed the matches that are represented in terms of the underlying topology into our simulator, and there we can do our analyses. So in the Austin region, we looked at two different types of underlying topology, one of which is the Network Modeling Center Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, DTA model, which we use for regional models. This is a large node link representation of the Austin area that consists of over 11,000 nodes. But we also scraped off the freely available OpenStreetMap set, which incidentally is far, far more detailed than the NMC model that we built, and also takes a lot longer to process because it's a lot more data to deal with. But I'll show you what this means in terms of how good our results were. Now, looking at the geolocated points, we looked at the Capital Metro, the Public Transit Agency, GTFS set that's freely available, and we isolated 170 shapes representing 84 routes. There were some duplicates in the set, so we decided not to deal with duplicates. And already you can see one of the biggest challenges. The points range from between 2 inches to over 3,000 feet apart. The 3,000 feet gaps happen more in the rural areas, but there were no other map matching algorithms we could think of that could be tolerant to gaps that were that big. We also looked at GPS data that was collected second by second from a series of probe vehicles, 44 journeys, and these ranged from 0 to 114 feet apart. These are our results. Our first experiment was to run the Capital Metro GTFS points, shapefiles, over the NMC Campo underlying node link topology. And after doing the refined cycle to fix the underlying topology, in which we actually had to fix 80 problems within the underlying model, we had 0 discontinuities, which meant that from every origin to every destination that we tested with, we were able to find a route through the underlying topology. The accuracy when we hand-checked a series of points, which I will qualify was 6% of the total number of points, was 95.9%, meaning there were some points that were a little bit off from where the roads were, but good enough for us to do our analyses with. I also want to add that in the underlying topology, the fixes that were mostly required were routes through parking lots, because a lot of Capital Metro routes go through parking lots, and in our DTA models we already had, we did not look at parking lots. There are also some issues around service roads, around freeways and U-turns. Another experiment that we did was to run the GPS second-by-second data over our NMC Campo DTA underlying node link representation. And because we had second-by-second data that was very detailed, we had 0 discontinuities and 100% accuracy. Then we did what I think is the most interesting experiment. This was to run our GTFS data that we freely obtained online with OpenStreetMap data, which we also freely obtained online, and found that our accuracy in our hand-checked subset was 99.8%, which is interesting commentary for the value of freely available crowdsourced model information versus building a proprietary model with limited resources. So we are going to look very seriously at the future of the value of crowdsourced labor that's very handy for forming our models. In the future, especially in the case of our first experiment, we realized that if we look at link curvature, we can get much better accuracy. And we also have many improvements that we can find with computation speed. We are fast enough to process in real time in a hypothetical situation where GPS points come in second by second from probe vehicles. But to run the 170 shapefiles with Capital Metro data, it took about 4.5 hours. Did I mention that our work is open source? Any researcher that wants to use our map matcher can obtain it through GitHub, and the link is on screen. And I welcome opportunities for collaboration to improve the software and make it more versatile. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. All the presenters could come back. Todd is going to lead us in a discussion. We still have plenty of time.
Well, we've
Or
got
some time.
7 minutes or so. So we'll want to make short questions and short answers. So this was some fascinating use of vehicle monitoring, tracking, trajectory analysis, etc. I'd like to ask one question of my own and then just turn it over to the audience to probe further. Of Yi Cheng, I wanted to ask, I wonder if you've considered, and you probably have, opening up a marketplace for bartering with trips, so that somebody who has a greater urgency could offer, say, $10 to the marketplace, and then someone on the other side could say, all right, I will delay my trip, and I'll take one of those dollars and maybe 9 other people. And of course, this wouldn't take long until you get a critical mass where you could actually affect the traffic flow. I'm sure that's built in or has been foreseen. Any thoughts about it, and could it work?
Technology may work in a closed system where, for example, you have a freeway system where you control by limited access by the ramp. So essentially, if you have that kind of control access, effectively you can do that. But they also, again, going back to the equity issues, it could also be considered a Lexus lane. Somebody has money, want to, they can always pay and preempt everybody. So beyond that, there has to be some sort of treatment to ensure that it's fair. Yeah. How right now, you just simply rich. They just want to be on top of everybody versus.
Well, I think that's a proper wealth redistribution plan myself. Some people have more money, some people have more time, and
so there's a notion of we call it mobility credit, and there's actually an interesting idea started with Professor Carl Kalkman here at UT about charitable credit. Is that actually someone will be given a certain amount of the credit, and if you say, for example, you don't use up your credit, you can sell it. But the idea is not necessarily to do with the use of the facility. Think about this as kind of IP6 where you have a priority queue in a data packet, and somebody pay for it and they get a prior access. This is very commonly seen in the data network, but I have not seen any experiment in the real world interpretation yet.
Sure, and we'd run into the same sort of political debates about net neutrality and road neutrality, but I say, let them pay. And Tom, I noticed that you were sensitive to this too, saying that the bikes were not getting any preference. Why not? I'm not I'm out there lowering everybody's insurance premiums. Physical insurance premiums. I'm taking up less road space, polluting much less. Why not give me some priority? And definitely the buses. I ride my bike to the bus, bring the bus. Give me some priority.
Well, that is possible. That is not what we're scoped to do. And I think it's, as you said, buses do have priority. Bus routes,
Do they currently? I know in Austin that there were some news stories saying that they hadn't activated this on Guadalupe to give these new Metro Rapid buses actual signaling priority. Has that changed?
I believe there's 2 routes, and I know I think Todd was here from Capital Metro. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are 2 routes that are actively implementing the priority for buses. So basically they have a schedule. If they get behind schedule, they can extend a green or bring a green up sooner to try to get them back on schedule. And it can make the buses a little bit more efficient. And I think the thought there, you've got multiple riders, it does make sense. Sure. For the cyclist, right now, at least what we've been scoped for the city of Austin is really to help just with that problem of bikes not being detected at all by the system sometimes. So
Sure.
that's what we're working on, the proof of concept. Policy-wise, would you want to do that? That is something that I think municipalities or agencies will need to decide, and we could technically do it, but it's not something that we're currently focused on unless directed to.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's turn it over to questions you might have for our panelists.
Todd,
Sure.
I just had a quick comment, not a question. You were talking about some people have more time and some people have more wealth. The problem is that there are many people who do not have too much time, or who do not have too much wealth, and they are the ones who are also time poor. And that's where the social equity issues start to come in. If you look at the Chicago region, for example, the ones who commute the longest distances are the ones who generally are in the lower echelons, if you will, in terms of their marketing potential, the market potential. So
Sure.
that's where I think all the touchy.
But this is about as fair as it comes. If you don't want to opt into this app, the Metropia app, you just go when you want to go, right? It's the people who opt in that can sort of coordinate among themselves, and maybe you could buy me off, given a greater urgency. But those who aren't in the system, who don't care to be part of the app, they just go when they want to go, and what could be fairer than that, I mean, it seems like we're reflexively always looking for inequalities to worry about when it's quite open. And so, any other topics, Tom?
So, yeah, I appreciate the discussion here, and I saw that many of the applications we saw were using existing, over the cellular link or over the existing infrastructure. But I'm wondering, if we want to scale this, these are kind of proof of concepts, is that going to cause a strain, or what kind of data volume are we talking about? Not for future applications, just for these applications that we have today. Is it feasible to do this on a large scale with the existing network infrastructure?
Yeah, Yi-Cheng and Tom, you were both basically leveraging the phones, an application on the phone, which would be using AT&T or Verizon's infrastructure. And does it what are the data rates you're talking about, and does it become problematic if we scale it up?
I think that's something we certainly thought about. Right now in our proof of concept, I think we have roughly 5 to 10 users that are out there using it. So we want to see what impact does that have, what kind of cost does that have for the users, because we think that would be a deterrent if every time you ride your bike and you start this app, if it's going to eat into your data plan. And that's the one thing when we've talked about trying to scale this up, if the city moves forward with it, to making it open to everyone, trying to do more of the processing at the actual phone, so we only put the call out when they need it for a signal that they're approaching, versus right now where they're continually communicating with the traffic signal system, letting them know where they are at all times. We think we probably need to make that switch to really make it feasible on a large scale, but we're still investigating that right now.
Right, so right now for a 30-minute trip, typically we probably transmit about 1 megabytes of data.
1 megabyte?
1 megabyte of data, and not to consider even in the future if we compress the data before we transmit it, that could even be slower. I think the potential strain will be on the server side, and we tested our server. We can process about 40,000 requests per minute, and again, it's been scaled up in the Amazon cloud. So far we have not seen any strain on either client side or server side.
So Tom, does 1 meg per 30 minute per user sound formidable to you?
Right now, no, but if you have 1 million users at
Yeah.
peak rush hour, and then you have also consider that traffic is being shared with many other use cases. So I think it's just something that needs to be considered.
Sure. Other questions you might have?
I have a question for Yi-Cheng. You talked quite a bit about your app and how it might help in terms of the operations side, but it seems to me that it can also help quite a bit on the planning side, in particular using your trajectories as a mechanism to validate activity-based models or trip-based models or whatever. Have you thought about that?
Well, in fact, yes, I think we see a lot of value in supporting the planning activities, starting from just from the calibration of any model we currently have. Essentially, in the historically we've been using on-point data, like point sensor, volume, but right now we have such a rich amount of detail of the daily activity pattern, even a route choice. That opens a lot of opportunities. So far, we have 2 NPO actually expressed interest just to explore what they're going to do with this kind of data. But yes, you'll be mind-boggling once you start thinking about how much I can do with this data. And it could even be scary because in the past we calibrate our model with very sparse point data. Now, if you have much richer amount of data to really show your model can match well with such a huge amount of data, actually it could be even more challenging.
Ken, with respect to the open source plugs that you were making, so Google is offering GTFS openly, but they're of course not offering their underlying maps openly. You had to grab some Open Street View maps for that. What kind of inefficiencies do you think you see in people proprietarily stovepiping their information here? Google is surely doing a lot of us a big service, even though they're not sharing their underlying maps with us. Do you think something better could emerge if it weren't proprietary?
I think the biggest inefficiency is, as a researcher, I really can only treat Google as a black box. I don't know what's going on underneath the hood. I don't know where it falls on its face, except for a couple places where I've seen it not quite work well. Works well most of the time, works well for most people, but there's no way of me knowing for sure. If I have control or more knowledge about what's going on, I then know its shortcomings. I know how to avoid them, how to circumvent them, how to account for them when I'm reporting on my information, my analyses.
I see. So it's the vast hordes of university researchers that are going to force Google to open up their maps to the world. Great. And Yi-Cheng, you were making some comments along these lines too, saying that Google now only takes into account one possible destination, whereas your application was looking at 5 simultaneous hypotheses. And so it seems like a variety of different contributors to this ecosystem helps out. But I don't suppose it would be very hard for Google to just bring it up to 5 hypotheses, or is there some special technique that you're using that you think that would be difficult for Google?
No, I think what's more important is I think Google, I believe if they want to do 5, they can do 5, or they can do 10.
Yeah, right.
I think the Google Now project, if you track Google Now project, is actually just a fun side project for them to do. And then I don't know how long it's going to last when they're going to kill it. The main difference between Metropia and Google Even Ways is about reactive information provisioning or active behavioral change. Mm-hmm. That's really what we are striving for, is do everything we can trigger motivation to help you to make a better choice, a smarter choice, and being rewarded for it.
Yeah, well, what can you buy with 70 points?
You need a fraction of the gift card.
Okay, so you can trade it for money, huh? Is it like Bitcoin?
You just another couple more trades, you'll be getting there.
Okay, good. Jen?
I have a question for Tom. Through your app, you'll be collecting some potentially really interesting data that could help us figure out or understand more about bicyclists' behavior. Mm-hmm. What do you all or the city of Austin plan to do with that data, or do you have plans for it?
I'm going to turn to Dave and ask him if there are specific plans. I don't think we've gone that far yet, but Dave, I'll put that to you.
We're in discussions with CTR for one about warehousing all this data for use for research or application development, whatever. That's in fact, I think we have a meeting next week about that coming up pretty quick. So we are in discussions with what to do with that data.
Yeah. What I like best is that by allowing detection of bikes, then bicyclists are faced with this choice of having to wait for an interminable amount of time or break the law a lot less often. And I run red lights when I sit there and know that there's I mean, I'm at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm at an intersection and it's not detecting me.
Absolutely.
I go right through.
One of the things we've talked about, we have a new law in the city of Austin. You can't use mobile devices, but you start this before you begin. We want to provide feedback. So when you do get you approach a signal and you have been detected, maybe it's an audible, maybe it's a vibration, you can set that. So you know each time that at least I know I've been detected. I still may need to wait a minute or two for the light to turn green, but we want to give that encouragement to cyclists to know that they have been detected. So from the safety aspect, that's a huge part of it, is trying to discourage running red lights. It's
Sure.
obviously a safety issue for the cyclist and for the motorist. So we hope we can do that.
But more broadly speaking, we wouldn't need under wire or under road loops if this ends up being an effective technique. No more of that costly installation.
I think looking far down the road, if you were able to handle that amount of data, but ultimately if we're able to, we said we don't want to use track, but if we're able to know where more vehicles are, that would allow us to remove some of that infrastructure.
But
from
for
the
that,
field.
we would need lane level accuracy because the loops are lane level accurate. right?
Exactly. Right now, we're finding we're getting about roughly 30 foot of accuracy.
Yeah.
So there is a challenge to know, is that cyclist making a left turn or going
That's
straight?
right.
So there's one of the.
That's
things
one of
we're
the other
doing.
reasons why this precise GNSS stuff is going to be necessary going forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all the time we've got. We'll turn it back over. And we thank our panelists again.